Hurricane Harvey leaves widespread devastation as Texas braces for severe flooding. The most powerful storm to hit Texas in more than 50 years has killed at least one person and is now threatening catastrophic flooding as search and rescue teams deploy to the hardest-hit zones. Harvey slammed into Texas, the heart of the U.S. oil and gas industry, yesterday as a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 209 km per hour. That made Harvey the strongest storm to strike the state since 1961 and the most powerful storm in over a decade to come ashore anywhere in the mainland U.S. It ripped off roofs, snapped trees, and triggered tornadoes and flash floods, while also curtailing a large portion of America's oil and fuel production and prompting price hikes at the pumps. Harvey has since weakened to a tropical storm, but is expected to lash Texas for days as it lumbers inland, bringing as much as 102 centimeters of rain and affecting heavily populated areas like Houston. One person died in a house fire in the town of Rockport, 48 kilometers north of the city of Corpus Christi, Mayor Charles Wax said, marking the first confirmed fatality from the storm. Another dozen people in the area suffered injuries like broken bones, another official said. The town took a direct hit from the storm and had streets flooded and strewn with power lines and debris. At a recreational vehicle sales lot, a dozen vehicles were flipped over and one had been blown into the middle of the street. By Saturday evening in Rockport, a caravan of military vehicles had arrived with people and equipment to help in the recovery efforts, and town officials announced an overnight curfew for residents. "It was terrible," resident Joel Valdez, 57, said. The storm ripped part of the roof from his trailer home at around 4 a.m., he said. "I could feel the whole house move." Mr. Valdez said he stayed through the storm to look after his animals. "I have these miniature donkeys and I don't know where they are," he said, as he sat in a Jeep with windows smashed by the storm. Resident Frank Cook, 56, also stayed through the storm. "If you have something left of your house, you're lucky," he said, surveying the damage from his vehicle. Streets deserted as winds still rage. Before the storm hit, Rockport's mayor told anyone staying behind to write their names on their arms for identification in case of death or injury. A high school, hotel, senior housing complex and other buildings suffered structural damage, according to emergency officials and local media. Some were being used as shelters. The coastal city of Port Lavaca, farther north on the coast, had no power and some streets were flooded. "There is so much tree damage and debris that the cost of cleanup will be enormous," Mayor Jack Whitlow said after touring the city. The streets of Corpus Christi, which has around 320,000 residents, were deserted, with billboards twisted and strong winds still blowing. City authorities asked residents to reduce use of toilets and taps because power outages left wastewater plants unable to treat sewage. The city was under voluntary evacuation ahead of the storm. The White House said President Donald Trump had been meeting with his cabinet and other senior administration officials to discuss the federal response to the flooding and damage caused by Harvey. In a statement issued on Saturday, it said Mr. Trump held a video conference from the presidential retreat at Camp David. Mr. Trump instructed the relevant departments and agencies to stay fully engaged and positioned to support his #1 priority of saving lives. Storm weakens as it moves inland. Harvey weakened to tropical storm from hurricane strength on Saturday, the U.S. National Hurricane Center said. The center of the storm was about 241 kilometers west-southwest of Houston, moving at about 4 kilometers per hour, the center said in a morning update. Houston is the fourth most populous city in the U.S. and home to a third of the 6 million people that could be affected by Harvey. Residents of the city received automatic mobile phone warnings of flash floods early on Saturday. Authorities warned of the potentially life-threatening impact of close to 60 centimeters of rain falling on the city over several days. The storm's outer bands had already dumped 15 centimeters of rainfall on parts of the city by early Saturday afternoon, local time. The latest forecast storm track has Harvey looping back toward the Gulf of Mexico coast before turning north again on Tuesday. This rain will lead to a prolonged, dangerous, and potentially catastrophic flooding event well into next week, the National Weather Service, NWS, said. Harvey has triggered flash floods, the NWS said. The size and strength of Harvey dredged up memories of Katrina, the 2005 hurricane that made a direct hit on New Orleans as a Category 3 storm, causing levees and flood walls to fail in dozens of places. About 1,800 died in the disaster, made worse by a slow government emergency response. U.S. President Donald Trump, facing the first big natural disaster of his term, said on Twitter he signed a disaster proclamation that unleashes the full force of government help shortly before Harvey made landfall. "You are doing a great job, the world is watching," Mr. Trump said on Saturday in a tweet referring to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, which coordinates the response to major disasters. Fuel prices spike as refineries shut down. Utilities American Electric Power Company Incorporated and CenterPoint Energy Incorporated reported a combined total of around 240,000 customers without power. Several refiners shut down plants ahead of the storm, disrupting supplies and pushing prices higher. Many fuel stations ran out of gasoline before the storm hit, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency loosened gasoline specifications late on Friday to reduce shortages. Disruptions to fuel supply drove benchmark gasoline futures to their highest price in 4 months. More than 45% of the country's refining capacity is along the U.S. Gulf Coast, and nearly a fifth of the nation's crude is produced offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Just under 25% of Gulf output, or 429,000 barrels per day, BPD, had been shut in by the storm, the U.S. Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement said on Saturday.